Welcome everybody to our workshop called Embracing Adversity and Failure. So here are our presenters for today. I'm Shanila Johnson. I'm a junior at Rutgers and I'm an urban studies major. And I'll go ahead and introduce Rob DeMarco, who is a senior here in our social work and criminal justice program at Rutgers. He's not on today, but he will be on Wednesday if you want to join again.
Sorry, I was muted. Awkward. Hi, everyone. My name is Milani Cruz-Stokes. I'm currently a senior majoring in criminal justice and a minor in legal studies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Sifland. I'm a senior undergraduate social work major with a focus in management and policy.
So our objectives for this workshop are going to be to define failure. I know people have had encounters with failure throughout their life and have just heard the word a million times. So we just want to define what it really is. We want to share what failure has taught us personally, and we also want to connect failure to leadership and growth. And we're going to start off with a little game, an icebreaker. So it's going to be 2 truths and 1 lie, but to jazz it up, we're going to do 2 failures and 1 success. So I'll give everyone some time to think, but feel free in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to say 2 failures and 1 success. Don't reveal them to us. We'll have to guess which one is the success.
So to give everyone a few ideas of what we mean by 2 failures and 1 success. So a failure could be, a job that you didn't get or that you got fired from. And a success could be, you were accepted into Rutgers Camden, let's say, or university, anything along those lines.
Clara, it's like 2 truths and a lie, but instead of doing 2 truths, you'll do 2 failures. Instead of doing 1 lie, you'll do 1 success. Am I explaining it right?
Yes.
And we'll have to try to guess the 1 success out of everything that you say. Does that make more sense?
So they're all actually true. Just 2 of them will be failures and 1 will be a success. And the guessing part of that is just guessing which ones are failures and which one's the success.
So I see, Christian, you started putting something in the chat.
Elena, would you mind muting your mic? We're just getting some background noise.
So I can actually start with this. So my first one is that I didn't get into the Fulbright Scholars Program. My second one is that I got fired from my first job. And my third one is that I did not get accepted into Stockton University. So can anyone guess which one is the success?
What was the second thing that you said?
I got fired from my first job.
Yeah, I think you successfully did not get fired.
That is incorrect. I actually did get fired from my first job. No, my one success was that I did get into Stockton University. Yeah. Does anyone else want to go? If not, we can move on to our next slide.
I'll give it like 30 more seconds and then we could probably move on. Alexa, did you want to go?
Moi?
Did you want to go?
Okay. I'm trying to think of failures because I honestly have a hard time thinking of them just because like I haven't had like a lot of opportunities in which I could actually fail in, if that makes sense. You know, like I'm trying to think. Okay, let's see. I got into honors college freshman year. Right? Is that how I do it? Okay, yeah. Wait, okay, I am a little bit confused as to how this is working. Can you explain it again?
So you say, can someone else explain it? Because I'm starting to get a little confused too.
So,
Maybe we can just move on. Maybe we can just move on. Okay, so let's talk about what failure is and define it a little bit and the different connotations and perspectives on it. So failure, as defined by Oxford in 2020, is the lack of success. Van Gogh in 1884 defined it as just making mistakes. Clara put in the chat an example. Straight A's in many classes, had a job, administrates a group on DeviantArt. So then which one would be the success out of those?
Well, like, which is the ungenuine success?
So Leanne Westman guessed straight A's as your success. Also, Michael, you're private messaging me.
Anyway, how long are we doing this?
There's enough guesses. Did anybody get it right?
Casey Nugent. I never had a job.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Wait, so I guess it right?
I never had a job. At least not paying one.
Okay. Well, we can talk about.
Count some. Unless, then again, I'm not sure if we count getting donations from Discord.
I mean, I think that's up into your interpretation.
I never had an official paying job. How about that?
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Okay, let's
And
go back to the definition. We're going to go back to the definition. So making mistakes. So here's some examples: losing a job, not getting into a school. The refusal or inability to act could also be a failure. Like if you didn't even take the chance, you might consider that a failure, or not following through on something. Cracking under pressure can feel like a failure. Fumbles, missed throws, strikeouts, if we want to use sports language, but that can be applied to metaphorically to anything else, really. So go ahead and go to the next slide.
Yep. And just the one thing to note is that, overall, there is no one definition of what failure is. It can entail a whole bunch of things. And that's what the icebreaker was intended to be, to show that there can be multiple things that can count as failures. It all depends on how the person and what they think about what failure means.
Right. Well, we'll tweak that for tomorrow to make it a little more clear. Thanks for everyone bearing with us. But so here's what failure can affect. So it's not just this thing on paper or on your transcript or anything like that. It kind of does something to shape you as a person, but that doesn't always have to be negative. So we'll get to that. But here's the negative ways that it can affect someone. So in their cognition, lowered executive functioning, slower reaction times, decreased memory, decreased muscular function, and emotionally lowered self-esteem, lack of motivation, frustration, depression, general doubts about self-efficacy. So people tend to internalize failure as something kind of like wrong with them, and dwell on that, whereas they tend to see other people as successful, even if they're doing the same things and there's not really a difference. So we want to kind of define failure a little more clearly than just the textbook definition of like, oh, you're wrong and you didn't do something right. Does anyone want to talk about how they feel about failure personally with this slide?
I think I definitely relate to failure more on the emotional aspect, not as much the cognition one. I think, and from the previous slide, like failure for me definitely comes from like my inaction. There are a lot of things that like I don't act upon because I'm like too anxious to do it in like in fear of having failure. So like it's like
It's like this
a double-edged sword.
cycle.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to fail at this, but at the same time, like, you know, what's that quote? You miss 100% of the things you don't strive for, whatever. Like, that weird quote, yeah.
Yeah. And studies show that once kind of a pattern of failure starts, people tend to fall into it and make it this self-fulfilling prophecy. But we can reframe that and find the value in failure and make it work for us, which, if you could go to the next slide, takes us to the flip side. So Uday Yadla in 2016 said, failure is the greatest teacher. Failure is a prerequisite for success. Just one drop in a lifetime of experiences. And it is also the state of living and working in a way that isn't aligned with our values. And that's one way of looking at it. To me, like, you can do something in line with your values that maybe isn't successful, but it gets you to where you need to be. And if we never failed at anything, how much could we learn from success after success, or easy after easy, or not taking risks? That kind of comes with the territory. So what can we kind of dispel this negative connotation and internalization of failure and use it, harness it, embrace it, and really kind of not be as afraid of it as we would otherwise be. Failure can also bring insight. So it presents faulty ways of thinking and outdated technologies and practices. So, okay, this didn't work in this scenario, and that's why it failed. And now I can see that, and I can change it and do better next time. And I'll be so much more likely to be successful now that I've learned this lesson. So also with opportunity, failure presents ways to improve, openness to trying new things. Okay, well, I tried this thing and it didn't work for me, but I liked this aspect of it. So maybe I can go in this other direction now that I never would have known had I not failed at this other thing. So that's just one of many examples with opportunity. And then resilience. By removing the fear of failure what it looks like on the other side, and knowing it fully, I think it kind of helps with that inaction and that paralysis of, well, I'm not going to try because what if I fail? And when you do fail and it's not the end of the world, you know, or you gain something positive from it, then I think you can really start to gain momentum, and branch out and take more risks, and and that kind of thing. Does anyone have any examples or thoughts on times when failure brought them this kind of insight or opportunity?
Well, regarding losing games, I tend to get mad if that counts.
Get mad at what?
Losing games,
Oh, okay.
especially Yu-Gi-Oh, my favorites.
Is there something that you learned from that you're able to then change or look at differently?
Well, the thing is, sometimes I'm just, how's the word? Still raging, regardless of what I tell myself.
Well, it can be a difficult
I get my
cycle
Yu-Gi-Oh card.
to break out of, but like taking that step back and not feeling so like deeply within the emotional
Yeah, not that,
connection to the
but
failure.
I sometimes either go to bed or like take it out on an exercise machine, for example. Also, thumbs up at Lee.
Thanks for sharing that. Is there anyone else who
Although
also has a?
there are many times when that makes me feel like I'm a loser.
What for well, that's a good example to bring up, because we don't want the failures to define us. We don't want to then assign a label, because one or even 100 lost games, that doesn't make you a loser as a person, you know? Like, we want to, failures are this thing that happens, they're this action, but they are not you as a person.
Yeah, but I still don't understand why. Sometimes I still don't understand why I lose, why I fail, why I.
That's okay. I mean, that's what we're all always figuring that out. And that's kind of what we're here to learn too.
You know.
Do you want to go to the next slide?
And this coincides well with what Alex was actually just saying, that failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. So as Alex was just saying, your failures aren't, well, they may be part of your identity and making you who you are today, but they're not labels on your identity. So you would never label yourself as a failure, because no one on this call is a failure. So yeah. And at this point in the presentation, does anyone have any questions?
No.
I have one. About that quote. What's the difference between a peel-on tattoo and a drill-on tattoo in terms of the context of the quote?
One's temporary, that you can, that like
Washes off over
goes
time.
away over time.
Yeah.
And then the drill-on tattoo would be your typical tattoo, so that's more permanent. But then you can always get laser. If we're making it metaphorical, you can always do something to change it. It doesn't have to be a mark on you forever. Or you can get a cover up like I did and then turn it into something beautiful.
I mean, still, it's kind of scary to get laser drill-on tattoos. To me, especially because some of them are infected.
Well, yeah, but not everything permanent has to stay the same forever. Even if it's permanent, even say with tattoos, with failure, with something that happens in your life, you know, like.
So failure's a bruise or peel-on tattoo, not a regular tattoo.
Correct, but even if you feel like it's a drill-on tattoo, like I said, if we want to take the metaphor further, there are still ways that, so say it's something that's like a really deep set failure that kind of changes your life. That doesn't mean you can't come back from it or adapt or do something to enrich your life within those circumstances in that situation, because we're not gonna act like every failure is like a tiny blip on the radar. Sometimes they're really big, but that doesn't mean it has to take over your life and mark you forever, you know?
I did want to share my experience if I could. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to speak earlier, but I just didn't get a chance. But something with failure that I've learned quite recently. I want to go to medical school. So I had taken the test to get into medical school and didn't score as well as I would have hoped. So it kind of delayed my process and has caused me to have to go into a gap year. And when it first happened to me, it kind of shook me because I've always been a good student. I've always done well. I've never really experienced an academic failure in that manner. So when I did, it kind of really tore me down and made me question who I was and whether I was really cut out for what I wanted to do. But now that I've kind of faced that one big failure, I feel like I've come out much stronger and much more resilient, like you were mentioning, to be able to handle the difficult career path that I want to go down. Once I know I'm not going to be perfect for the rest of my life, I may lose patience, I may have these things happen. So I think it was kind of a beginner to reminding myself that I am a human being. But it also, my life plan has become so much more what I want it to be now that I've actually been forced into a gap year. So sometimes failures even can put you into a place that you didn't want to be, but you really need it to be.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing. And to kind of add to your point, like if we were successful in everything we did or everything that we tried the first time, like maybe we would end up on a path that wasn't really right for us, or that we didn't really enjoy or identify with, because okay, well, I'm good at this, well, I've gotten so far down this path, and I guess I should stay just because I've been successful, so that means it has to be the right thing for me. I think failing can be very telling, even if not for learning and going down the same path, but like you said, figuring out what is right for you, what's best for you, and making your life more enriched in the process. Did anyone
Yeah,
else
I tend
have
to push my own identity as well as what my purpose is in life, as well as my what's my end of life goal, and especially so when I lose games and get mad.
Mm-hmm.
Or other things like someone doesn't understand me. That also triggers me. Then yeah, I do speak kind of fast. I'm working on that.
That's good. Just in the interest of time, our next activity is going to take up a bit more time than what we've done previously. So I think we want to get started on that. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yes.
Dr. Westman.
So before we get into our activity, we would like Dr. Westman to share a few words about the activity that we're about to get into. So Dr. Westman, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Shanila. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see, well, I don't see all of you. I wish I could. So if you're at all inclined to turn your camera on, I wish you would. So we're talking, so I want to just tell you a little bit about this, idea of having a failure resume. This is actually becoming more and more commonplace, I guess. And in fact, I have some colleagues who keep 2 resumes on their desktop, the one that they would send if they were actually hoping to get it hired or be considered for something, and then the other one that lists all the things that didn't work out, the jobs they applied for and didn't get, the programs that they applied for, the grants they applied for, the papers they tried to publish, just anything that represents a failure. And one of the things that they have found, the people who do this activity, is that the failures outweigh the successes. That in fact, one professor, he's a professor at Princeton, said that for every success he had on his resume, he had 5 failures. And I just think that is really interesting to think about, because we tend to think of our failures, well, first of all, as something shameful and that we would want to hide, but instead, they probably are the key to our success. Like taking those risks, like Alexa said earlier. I think it's, well, I don't know if it's from The Office where he said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So, or Wayne Gretzky said it, I don't know, but that idea that that you just sit back and think, well, I'm not going to take a risk because I might fail, then, in fact, you're just only going to do things that are safe, right? So we had an event last year before the pandemic where about 20 students came and met in the Honors College and at the conference table there. We fed them lunch, so we got everybody kind of loosened up. And then I said, okay, we're going to do these failure resumes. And I gave everybody a blank resume, just with like jobs I didn't get, schools I didn't get into, classes I failed, that sort of thing. Then I handed out my own failure resume, which actually was, I have to tell you, it was a little bit tough on my ego. Like I handed it out, and then I thought, what if they don't, I have to tell them, well, yeah, that didn't work out, but then this worked out. Otherwise, you're going to think I'm just a big loser. So it was tough to hand it out, and it was, but we ended up working on our failure resumes together, and then people would show different examples there, or they would share. They would just say, okay, this is a job I didn't get, and this is a program I didn't get into, and in fact, working on my failure resume reminded me of things I'd forgotten about that I failed. I mean, it was really kind of depressing. I thought, oh yeah, I forgot I didn't get into that program, or I forgot I didn't get that position that I really hoped to get. And so it was, but at the same time, especially looking back, it was easy to see how, those doors might have shut, but there were other doors or windows sometimes that opened, not even doors. Like I actually, didn't even go out the way I thought I was going to go out, or come in the way I thought I was going to go in. And so I think this is a really useful task, but it does take some, fortitude, right? to put it together, and a lot of like tamping down the ego to share it with other people. So, and this was part of a whole series of events that we had last year based on failure. We had another event where Eric Chuang, I don't know if he's a philosophy professor, I don't know if you know him, and he talked about the upside of quitting, when you should quit, like knowing, okay, I have put a lot of energy into this, but this is not for me. And the example he gave is, I don't know if you know this. Oh, the upside of quitting, to go to that medicine, good. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but there's baseball, Major League Baseball teams have farm teams, right? Or AAA teams where the players hope they'll get called up to the major leagues. 10%, only 10% of them ever get called up, but 100% of them think they're going to get called up. So when in fact 90% won't, right? So when do you quit? Like when do you say, you know what, like statistically, this probably isn't going to work out for me, or do we just, or do we say, no, you just keep trying. If you just work hard enough, you'll be successful. I mean, that's kind of one of the stories that we tell about success, and I'm sorry, but I don't think it's true. I think there's some things that aren't, you can work really hard at it and you still might not be successful, or you might not get called up to major leagues, right? And so how do you assess that? And so that was a really interesting event to think about. To think about how failure isn't something that we need to be afraid of or avoid or be ashamed of, but instead to just embrace it, and even maybe do things that make us really uncomfortable, or we think, I'm probably not that good at that, but try it out. So Alex, did you want them to try out a failure resume here today? Okay. So do you have any questions? Well, first of all, I'm looking a little bit at the chat. Does anybody have any questions about a failure resume, or why somebody would, I don't know, put that together?
How are we going to go about this in the online format, or are we?
Alex will give us some instructions. So hold on one second. Do you have any questions about about why somebody would create this in the first place? Or do you know anybody that's done a failure resume? Or have you done a failure resume?
I haven't done a failure resume before, but I have done a resume.
Yeah, most people have a success resume. hopefully. So, but fewer people have a failure resume. And in fact, the Princeton professor who, he kind of got the ball rolling on doing this. He said his failure resume has gotten more attention than anything he's done professionally in his life. So he says, I'm famous now for my failures. And it's long. It's not just a one-page resume. It's 3 or 4 pages. And it kind of makes you feel better. Whoops, oh, sorry, there's noise in my house. It definitely makes you feel better, I think, to see, oh, look at that guy, you know, he's done really well, but look at all the things he's failed at, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Westman, for sharing. I think this is a great segue into our next activity, which is you all will be creating your resumes of failures. So in this activity, we want you to think about all the positions, goals, and activities that you did not achieve. It could be, you know, academics, internships, or different hobbies and activities that you just couldn't get. And we want you to think about one or more successful things that came out of failing those accomplishments, because we want to also emphasize that even though we may have, you know, this large list of failures, that there have been some success that has come from it, some accomplishments that we have achieved. And just like someone said earlier, you know, they took the medical school exam and it made them realize that they needed to take a gap year, but now they're going to be going on into the school that they're meant to go to and become, you know, successful in the medical field as they're supposed to. So we want you to take about 10 to 15 minutes to just generate some ideas, some example resume headings that you could use to kind of guide you in thinking about this is 1, colleges that rejected me, jobs or internships that I didn't get, as well as honors awards that I didn't receive. And, you know, it's up to you whether you want to choose these same examples or if you want to create your own. So we'll give you all about 10 to 15 minutes just to generate those. And then us speakers will share our own failure resumes that we created. And just let us know if you have any questions. And feel free to just unmute yourself or put them in the chat.
So behavior/habits I need to improve on is my resume, failure resume title.
That's great. I think that's a great category to include.
Thank you. P.S. There's this between did not get / need to improve on.
I know it's hard, but I would focus on really things that were just a flat out failure. You know, I'll tell, like, I'm happy to share some. I'm happy to entertain you with my many failures. So, because I already have a failure resume, so I need to read off of it.
Meet me.
So we'll try to come back around at what, 5:45 and start sharing. Does that sound good?
Yes.
That works for me. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna put on music. And Milani, the reconvene time is in 6 minutes at 5:45.
Oh, how will we share these failure resumes? Google Docs?
So we're just going, after the time is up, we'll share some of our failure resumes. And then for the rest of the participants, we'll just verbally share what we wrote down.
Oh, verbally. Got it. I'm writing notes down Google Docs anyway. Thank you, though.
You're welcome.
Trying to find my music that doesn't have lyrics. Because I'm one that can't really focus with lyrics. Here we go.
Maybe I could be growing instead of always holding
Okay, it's 5:45. Does everyone feel like they have at least something to share?
I do.
Okay, cool. Clara,
I have a lot to share.
no, and appreciate that. Just I want to be able to get to everyone, and because you've been sharing so far, I just want to be able to swing back around, and then we'll get to you after some more people have talked. But I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Right now, I'm going to share an example of some of our failure resumes. So this is Shanila's resume. Shanila, do you want to go through it?
Yeah, let me just put on my earphones real quick because my little sister's like blasting music. Can you hear me better, or do you still hear the music in the background?
We can still hear the music, but I can still, I mean, I can personally hear you fine over it.
Okay. So a job that I recently didn't get, like last month, was a position with the Rutgers School of Business. I applied through Handshake. A college that rejected me was Temple University. That was my #1 school going into undergrad, and I got waitlisted. A major I failed at the first school I was at because I'm a transfer student. I was a quantitative economics major, and I had to take Calc 3. I tried to take it, I think, 3 times, and I dropped it every single time. Hobbies and interests that I failed: singing, which I'm working on. I'm actually working on taking vocal lessons, and I'm still working on reading more. And this is a pretty good example because I didn't get into National Honor Society my junior year of high school. And then I worked really hard my junior year, and I got into my senior year. And one success that I've had that I'm still working on right now is I started a successful organization for young adults in Camden called Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. So this one is my resume of failures. And going through this, probably like some of you, I really struggled to think about some of my failures and successes. So I kind of took a different avenue of when I thought about my failures. So just to go through it, the jobs that I didn't get or fired me were Wawa and a certain law firm. The law firm was my first job, and I actually did get fired from it, which I thought was like the end of the world. But I overcame that. A college that rejected me was University of Pennsylvania. Fellowships that I didn't apply for was the Fulbright Summer Institute and the Fulbright Scholars Program. Honors and awards that I didn't receive were various outside scholarships. So when I was going through my resume of failures, I thought of failures being missed opportunities. And in high school, I didn't get the highest SAT score, but I decided that I wanted to go out of my comfort zone and apply, to the schools that I did want to go to. And even though they rejected me, I still found my place at Rutgers Camden, and I really haven't looked back at it. I also included the fellowships that I didn't apply for because I saw those as missed opportunities, and because I was afraid that I wouldn't get in, so I decided not to apply for it. But one success that I have had that I don't regret is that I actually applied for a fellowship this year and got into it. And it was supposed to be in Poland, but because of the coronavirus, it ended up being virtual. But just going through this activity really showed me that, failures could also be those missed opportunities that you don't take. And as Alexa was saying earlier, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And Dr. Westman had also briefly mentioned of, taking risks. So that was just how I went about doing my resume of failures. So at this time, does anyone have any comments, questions, or would like to share what they put?
Melanie, I just wanted to comment on what you said about missed opportunities because, that fellowship that you got for Poland is really a big deal. And one of the things I just think you should have applied for those other things. Like you would be a strong candidate. But I think sometimes we're afraid of taking risks, and it's a lot of work to apply for a fellowship, especially if you think, is this going to be a waste of my time? But I would say it's never a waste of your time. You learn so much about writing personal statements and about just sort of getting your thoughts together about your goals, that even if you don't get it, it's still, it's useful material to have. And I do think you're right. I think a lot of, the fear of failure keeps us from trying things or throwing our hat into the ring, right? Or taking a shot. So I really like that you made that point.
Right, and learning from the process of going through those things too. Like, I also didn't get fellowships, but I learned that, oh, since I went through this process and went to the person who knows about the fellowships, she was able to tell me about these other things that now I'm pursuing instead, and without having tried for the fellowships, I wouldn't have found that other path. Does anyone else want to share? Claire, so
It's mostly behaviors and habits I need to improve on. Like I said, picking nails and fingers, tantrum after losing games like Yu-Gi-Oh, eating too much, such as sneak eating, overeating, getting up in the middle of the night, procrastinating, Discord, Disney Magic Kingdoms, YouTube, Twitch.tv, and so on. As for one of my successes, though it's technically multiple, but there can be converged into a single, accepted into colleges. Rutgers University, Camden, New Jersey, and Thames Academy, Mitchell College, New London, Connecticut.
That's great. Yeah,
Yep.
and it's good to be self-aware and identify the things that maybe you're not happy with, but that you want to work on to change. And I think a lot of us, we block out the failures too, because like Dr. Westman said, there are things that you forgot about that you ended up putting on the failure resume, but not being afraid of them by kind of like demystifying this whole process and being vulnerable, not only with yourself, but with others, you'll find that you can connect with people more too, because we tend to only see the successes from others. Like, people only put, when they look the best on social media, or their happy times, or their congratulations and things like that, but we don't see people's struggles. So when we know everything about ourselves and all our failures and successes, and it feels like they're stacked in the negative, we don't see that of other people, but they're struggling with that too. And so being able to be open about it, and like I said, to demystify that process and be like, oh, this person I admire so much, who I see is super successful, had this string of 25 failures to even get to this point. You're like, oh, okay, well, that maybe I can do it too. And you don't feel as like stuck.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to tell you too is that before the pandemic, we were going to have an event on campus that was like four TED Talks about failure by 4 different professors who were going to stand up and basically, stand up figuratively naked in front of the campus and say, let me tell you all the ways in which I have failed. And I thought, it's so much more interesting to learn about people's failures and their successes, because you realize, that person, how it feels to fail. It feels like a huge setback. It feels like, well, I'm never going to be able to do this thing. And so you really have to get back up and I was sorry to use so many metaphors, but, get back up on that horse, take another shot, keep trying, because you'll find something. But it's, and that those people that have achieved some kind of success did that in spite of their failures. Not, they were able to say, well, you know what? Okay, so I failed at this thing, but that doesn't mean every door is shut now. So there's, and so I wish we could have had that event, because it was 4 professors who were going to tell, but of course the COVID came and that we failed.
Let's still have that event. Let's do it virtually. I would love to see
could,
it next semester.
That's a
Everybody
great idea.
put your names down. Write in. If you like this content, hit that like and subscribe for next for next semester. But
that's a good idea.
Sorry, Clara, 1 second. I just want to add to that.
I was like, LOL.
What?
I was like, LOL, and also I had another habit, but it's pretty gross. And
you don't need to share. So no, I think no, I appreciate you sharing before. I think we're gonna get to some other examples. But before that, in doing the research for this, Dr. Westman shared an article with us that talked about this failure resume, but also that there was a study done where students were in 3 groups, and they were each, so there was, everyone's basically taught all the successes of Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton, the great scientists, right? So that's what we're taught in school. Well, they had a group that was taught all the successes. They had a group that was taught all of the failures, and they had a group of those people, of those scientists, and how they struggled and in their work and spent years in scientific and research turmoil and everything, and got denied left and right. So, and then they had a group that was taught both. And they found that the test scores afterwards for all of those groups, the ones that were only taught the successes, their test scores actually went down from before they had that lesson, because they were so demoralized and they thought, well, this person, these people are a genius and I'm nothing like them. And so I can never kind of achieve it. It felt inaccessible to them with that disconnect. But the students, the 2 groups that were taught either the failures or both the successes and failures, saw their test scores improve. They were much more engaged in their learning and their education because they saw themselves reflected in people who were celebrated as successful by that like humanizing aspect. And I think that we need more of that, and I would love to see it more in our education. I have some great professors who have been vulnerable and shared that with me, and that has made me, I feel like, more passionate and motivated about even just the material that we're learning. So I personally love to see that.
I just want to point out Andrew's had his hand up for a little while.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't see. I only have the chat open. I'm so sorry. Let me try to.
Andrew, did you still want to share?
Yeah, that's all right. I just wanted to share and focus on a college that rejected me and what I learned from it. So I actually initially wanted to go to TCNJ and apply for their 7-year medical program, but instead they advised me to switch my major, and I was looking forward to attending that school because my brother had actually graduated from there and he spoke highly of it. So obviously I was torn. I questioned my academic abilities, and at one point I thought I wasn't good enough. But however, because of that failure, I was able to stick with my intended major here at Rutgers, and I get to be a part of the honors program, which has so far been like such a welcoming and supportive community. So there's a benefit out of that.
Yes, thank you for sharing. I definitely, that resonated with me a lot, because I did want to go. My New Penn was one of my dream schools, but then when I didn't get in, I just went to Rutgers, and honestly, I haven't looked back at like my decision to go to Rutgers, and I feel like that's where I was meant to be, and I haven't regretted it since.
Exactly. Yeah.
So at this time, I am going to continue with the rest of our presentation. Let me just share my screen for a second. Okay. So after considering, the different definitions of failure, now we want to bring it back to how failure relates to our leadership. So when a leader admits that they make a mistake, it earns them respect. So acknowledging when you have made a mistake is really something that is empowering and something that not a lot of people can do, because, as we are afraid of failure, we are afraid of making mistakes. And that sense of vulnerability that we get to, when we realize that we're not perfect, we make mistakes, we have our failures, but as we have said earlier, looking at those failures and those mistakes are what makes us stronger. And that's what leads us to strengthening the team that we're a part of. So whether it's being, in a classroom or being at work, making these mistakes and having these failures really strengthens the overall group, by earning us that respect and leaving us vulnerable. And it also makes us as leaders lead by example. showing other people that, you know, it's okay to make these mistakes and it's okay to have these failures. And at the end of the day, it is what makes us stronger. And it also builds a culture of trust. Because if you are in a group of, let's say, of your peers, and you realize that someone has taken a big step in acknowledging what they have done wrong or the setback that they had in their life, you know, that creates a sense of trust, because now you're able to say that, you know, this person was able to be vulnerable with me. And in that, you know, you learn from each other, and, you know, you learn from each other's experiences, and that's what just makes you grow and, you know, develop and further strengthen your skills as a leader. So we have a few minutes, but I wanted to kind of wrap this up with more of like an open discussion that we've had during the course of this presentation. So the first question that I want to pose to everyone is, why do you think that we're so afraid of failure? And just thinking about like those end results when we do encounter that failure in our lives. And anyone can answer either in the chat or they can unmute themselves.
I feel like sometimes we're afraid of failure because like we don't want people to look at us differently or look down on us for our mistakes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that, you know, as we had said earlier in this presentation, you know, having that failure or having that mistake is kind of like that label that we get. But we just have to keep in mind that, you know, it's only temporary. That failure is only temporary. And of course, there are going to be plenty of more successes that come out of that failure or that mistake. Anyone else like to share? I'm seeing a few people in the chat. Haley said, I think we're afraid of failure due to the influence of other people, as some people may be judgmental or negative towards another's failure, and no one wants to be embarrassed or talked bad upon. I think that's a really good point that you bring up, Haley. And I think that, you know, having this dialogue about, you know, what failure means and how it doesn't define us is really important to kind of like denouncing that like stigma of, you know, being a failure, I guess, in life and things like that. Alex said, putting it into the context of the bigger picture. Sorry, the chat's moving. What you learned from it, how it improves something in you or your work, etc. Everyone check out Brenna Brown's talk on vulnerability on Netflix.
Yeah, she goes really into vulnerability and this same conversation we're having about failure. And it is called The Call to Courage. It's on Netflix. It's based on a TED Talk she did, and it's a little over an hour long on Netflix, but if you want to just check out the TED Talk, I think that's like 17 minutes long.
I don't want to like type it all in the chat because it's a lot, but I feel like what I've learned from this is a really important conversation that needs to continue happening, because I know personally in the STEM world, the science world, it's like toxic in the way that when you mess up, when you fail, when you screw up, you're looked down upon and you're looked at like, ugh, why are you like that? But I think it's so important that we embrace failure and normalize it. And as society continues to do that, I feel like it'll become more acceptable. Right now, it's like super uncomfortable and it feels like you're doing something that is opposite of everyone else. But I think as everyone steps out and continues to normalize it, we will see positive results.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I definitely do see that as well in like the legal field with, you know, taking the LSAT and getting into like, you know, the top law schools. It happens everywhere. And, you know, we need to continue having these conversations, like you said. So that leads us into our next question, which is, when have you seen a leader admit or not admit their mistakes?
Would a famous leader count towards this?
Say that again.
Would a history famed leader count towards this?
Yeah, that could count towards it. So when have you seen them admit or not admit their mistake?
Hitler not admitting his mistakes, especially in the military.
Okay. Anyone else like to share?
I just wanted to share about what you said about not getting into Penn and like being like how we're scared of our failures. And both of my parents actually work for Penn. So if I would have applied and gotten in, I would have been able to go for free. So that was like always my goal as a kid. Like I always wanted to go to Penn, like just because, you know, my parents work there. And then when it came to like applying for colleges, like I was so afraid of not getting in because my brother, who's a year older than me, he had applied too the year before and like he didn't get in. So I was so afraid of not getting in that I just didn't apply. And like I regret that because one, it could have saved me a lot of money if I did get in. And also like that would have been a great opportunity to like, you know, that would have looked amazing on like medical programs, like on my resume. And I just regret not doing that because of the fear of failure.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point that you make, and you know that we really need to stress excuse me, is that, you know, it's not how you start, but it's how you finish things. And, you know, we're so afraid of having these mistakes and these failures that we just need to remember that it's not the end result, it's only temporary. And so I think, you know, this conversation shouldn't end here, but it should continue, whether it be, you know, attending future workshops with ILA, or if it's, you know, having these conversations among your peers and things like that. But I think, you know, acknowledging these failures and going through this resume of failures activity is really enlightening for all of us, you know, as we continue to, you know, move through our time at Rutgers University and go on into our future careers and endeavors, you know, just trying to shut down these different stigmas of what failure is and what mistakes are, and just embracing more of our successes in our lives.